All right. Welcome everyone to Loud and Agile Network on this beautiful fall evening. And we present Ralph Figuera. Ralph, correct me how to say your last name.
Figueroa. Hey, that's close enough. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for being so lenient with me. All right. So we have Ralph discussing Jira roadmaps, advanced roadmaps. We are familiar with various tools and plugins in Jira, and Ralph wants to show us how this one enhancement can really streamline our efforts in Jira, adopt agile and effective operational ways of working. So Ralph is an enterprise leader based in San Francisco. So now you know when to connect with him. Pacific Standard Time only, please. And he does work with teams and enterprises with the objective of aligning theoretical principles of Agile with real world's hands-on implementation. So over to you, Ralph, for your amazing hands-on presentation today.
Well, with that intro, I not need to introduce myself any further. Thank you, Meenakshi. And thank you to the community here for receiving me today. If you have been in a position where you have to do either PI planning or release planning, or after those plans are done, you have to manage a release from not the sprint to sprint perspective, but from the macro perspective, from the release level perspective. Manage the teams, the dependencies, the timelines and the execution. This here presentation will be very useful to you if you're using Jira Enterprise Edition, and hopefully will bring some interesting knowledge that you can apply as soon as you're back in your office space. I'm going to bore you with 4 slides, and then from there we're going to jump into a hands-on demo using JAR, or Jira Advanced Roadmap. First of all, the topics that we're going to be covering is what is Jira Advanced Roadmap, and how do you access it? What are the benefits of using Jira Advanced Roadmap, or JAR for short? And then we jump into the hands-on overview. Because the goal of this particular workshop is really to provide an overarching overview of the key features, I'd like to request out of the audience that as I am presenting, there's going to be a lot of information that I'm going to share. If you have questions, please jot them down in the chat window, and towards the end of the QA session, we'll have time to address those. And that way, we give time to cover all the key functionality. What is JAR? JAR is an Atlassian planning tool that is included in Jira Enterprise Edition or Jira Premium Edition, whether it's on the cloud or whether it's at the on-prem versions of Jira. It should be present, and it's already pre-installed, pre-configured, so you don't have to go and reach out to your admin necessarily. It's virtually integrated into Jira. Once you're done planning, so beyond just the planning stages, JAR is very useful to provide updates in showing for example, the scope of a release or a PI planning, monitor the execution, being able to map and visualize timelines, as well as identify dependencies across multiple teams and manage those dependencies. And then it does provide a healthy level of warnings about the release to de-risk your release way in advance before those issues come to fruition, right? So you enhance collaboration, and it provides transparency across teams. To the third bullet, I'd like to pause for a second and clarify. I have worked with teams who have used Roadmap, and which is another offering from Atlassian. Roadmap is actually a sibling of Jira Advanced Roadmap. I like to think of it as a simplified version of JAR, very limited in functionality. It just has the essence. And so folks who are not aware of that there's that offering, when I suggest let's use Jira Advanced Roadmap and they had a limited experience, they think we're talking about the same thing, and not, right? So there's Roadmap, there's Jira Advanced Roadmap, there's a separate offering that is called Jira Align, which I've worked with as well, and that's a whole different ballgame. For that one, you have to pay to get access to it. It has to be tightly integrated into Jira. It's a lot more complex to use. So today we're going to focus in JAR, Jira Advanced Roadmap. As the last slide here, I'm just going to highlight some of the benefits that you're going to see during the hands-on presentation, hopefully. JAR provides an enhanced aggregated view from multiple teams that are participating in a product life cycle or a project. And that includes the Jira artifacts. And I will show where is that at in the screen. There are 3 regions. The leftmost region that you're going to see will see the epics, the stories, the subtasks, the bugs, and so on. If your organization happens to have custom issue types that are above epics, like initiatives, themes, and so on, the tool supports showing that hierarchy as well. It does provide what I describe as an Excel-like functionality where you'll have the Jira fields presented in the tool in rows and columns, and you can edit those directly within Jira Advanced Roadmap. So you don't have to do dual entry. You can even sort some of those fields. Like for example, if you're doing a refinement session and you want to sort, just attack first the top high priority stories or issues. You could do that within JAR very effectively. And you have optics in the far right. I will showcase this in the screen when we get into the hands-on. And those project timeline optics is more alike like Microsoft Project, where you have Gantt chart-like views. And think of Gantt charts not in the context of, oh, we're going back to waterfall. It's more about providing optics that people who are outside of the team, senior directors and VPs, can actually get a sense as to the execution of epics or features in the context of the milestones that we're trying to hit before the release of those epics to the market, right, to the public. Jira is not a tool that is defined for a single role. And that's what the second bullet is about. So it's not a tool that is strictly just for Scrum Masters or for product managers or for engineering managers. Literally, anybody who has access to JAR can extrapolate value. It's the same information, but it's the context in which you use that information that makes it valuable. I work with VPs, which after seeing JAR, they reach out to me and they want to learn how to use it so that they can self-serve information. So it's really not role specific, but in the context of your role, you may find a lot of value in using it. All these roles that I list here have seen tremendous value in using Jira Advanced Roadmap. And is particularly useful when you are providing optics to run SOS, Scrum meetings, when you're doing backlog refinement sessions, for release planning or PI planning. Has proven to be a very effective tool without having to go to third-party tools like Mural or anything like that. In Jira natively, that's really hard to do, but thanks to JAR, it's a lot easier to actually manage that information. And so without further ado, let me stop here, the slide deck, and let's switch our attention into JAR. And bear with me for a second. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen real quick. I got kicked out of my account, and I will be here shortly. Let's see. I had it all set up very pristinely. All right, so
meanwhile, you are bringing back the presentation. Sorry to interrupt.
Yes,
Yes,
I am.
Can you, so you talked about Jira Align and other Jira functionalities, roadmap and plans. Can you please talk about Jira structures versus advanced roadmaps, please?
Wait, I'd be happy to address those questions about those additional plugins at the end of the session if you care. But those are plugins from third-party companies, and the main differentiator is that whether it's ALM structure, which is very powerful, whether it's Big Picture, which is another plugin, those are plugins that you have to pay extra in order to incorporate into your Jira instance. Whereby Jira Advanced Roadmap is already inbox. As long as you have access to Jira Enterprise, you don't have to pay any additional fees, right? So that's one of the main differentiator. But I can dive into that towards the end. Can you see my screen now? Can somebody confirm?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you for that resounding yes. So I am showcasing right now. This is my own instance of Jira Premium, and it's a fake project. I mean, I didn't want to get into troubles with any of our clients. However, it is a real project in the context of the structure, right? So you have sprints which have stories. I have one sprint that is active, a couple of sprints underneath. Way at the bottom, I have my product backlog, similar to what you'll see in any environment that you will be working with. I have fixed versions and I have epics all set up here. And notice that is in the UI, Jira Advanced Roadmap is not listed anywhere. And so that's the first question that people ask me. It's like, where do I access it? When it was first launched, after it got rewritten, it was called Jira Plans, and this is back in 2016 or 15. When Atlassian decided to not charge, and they were charging extra as a plugin that you have to pay extra for. At some point, Jira or Atlassian decided, let's just include the functionality into Jira Enterprise and rebranded Jira Advanced Roadmap. So happens that they never changed the name. So the UI just kept the name Plans. And so when you access your Jira environment, if you have Jira Enterprise Edition or Data Center Edition, you should be able to see Plans at the very top of the bar menu or the menu bar. So Jira Plans is the same as Advanced Roadmap. And so if it's not the first time that you access the tool, meaning Jira Advanced Roadmap, you'll have a cookie trail of previous plans that you have seen in the past. But if it's your first time, what you'll see is the ability to view all plans or create plans. And to the point about creating plans, the tool is very simple to use. It's very rigid, but that rigidity lends to simplicity in terms of learning how to use it right away and get value of it. And so let me provide an example of the simplicity of the tool. If I'm going to create a plan, I give it a friendly name that my organization will recognize. In this case, my fictitious organization says that this is Project Ninja, so let's call it Ninja. Next, you define the access, and you can either make it private, meaning in this case, I and those who I want to grant access to will be the only ones who will see the plan. Or I can make it open, meaning anybody who has access to this Jira environment that I work in can access my plan as well. So I'm going to leave it open. And the issue sources is where you define what Jira projects or what Jira boards are going to feed your plan with the information that you're going to be presenting via Jira Plans, Advanced Roadmap, that is. And you have three sources types: boards, where you can include one or more boards. And in this instance, I'm going to include one board from one team. As an example, I can include also another board from another team. But just likewise, I can also include projects. And again, it's from one or more projects. So here I'm going to include the Jira project from one team and the Jira project from my Rebel team, my next team as well. And so you can continue to aggregate projects or boards from the teams that are collaborating in a particular product cycle, right? That allows you to aggregate all the information and then bring it all together in Jira Advanced Roadmap. So after you click on the create button. I'm going to switch to the tab because it's already pre-created. After a couple of minutes building that view, you end up with a view that looks just like this one in this case scenario, right? Whereby I have my Jira artifacts being displayed, and I'm going to refer to this section here as the left region of Jira Advanced Roadmap. And I can see my epics. Should I have higher issue types, higher than epics, I'll be able to see them here too. Like if I had initiatives and themes and concepts, you can actually see that trickle down hierarchy. You can expand those epics to see actually the issue types that are associated, in this case, the stories or defects or tasks. And some of the stories here will have subtasks, and so you'll be able to see those as well. So you can keep expanding. So this section here is all about information from Jira. Nice thing about this is that you can also, from within this section here, you can do ranking. So if you're a product manager and want to rank the features, or if you want to rank at the story level, you could do that as well from this view and rank one story over another. You have the ability also to see what I describe as orphans, which is at the bottom of, I'm going to close this epic here. And orphans are stories or tasks or bugs, those issue type levels that are not bound to an epic, to a parent. And in some of the organizations that I work with, they have matured enough along the ways that they want to see any story mapped to an epic. Why? Because they want to be able to track that story belongs to this feature, and then by bumping it to the feature, they can track the progress and the percentile complete. And I will show an example of that here shortly. Now you can do that in Jira natively, right? But then you have to open the story. You have to remember the epic name. You got to go to the epic link, type the epic name, and then save it. Whereby here, I can just simply just grab, say, for example, this, if I know that this particular story here belongs to this epic, I can just drag and drop it, and it's done. I don't have to remember anything else. So there's a lot of drag and drop cool functionality that exists here. I'm going to switch real quick here. Actually, before I switch, let me actually explain one more functionality that is useful in the context of Jira. In Jira, you have JQL, which you use as a Jira query language to structure views, right? Jira does not have JQL. However, you have filters. And by selecting the filters, you can actually drive the information that is presented. Right now, in this scenario, I have 22 epics, right? These are, let's say, these are all the epics that I have in my project. But I'm meeting with my team, and I want to talk in the context of what is the scope of work for my next release. So a release is a kind of akin of a fixed version in Jira. So let's say I can focus my attention in my November release by simply clicking on the fixed version for one team or both teams. In this case, I'm just going to focus in the Optimized Agile team, which is the organization I work with, Optimized Agile. I notice that suddenly, instead of 22 epics, now I only see 7. So I suddenly, without having to write any JQL, I shrunk the focus of my conversation to the scope of work for that release. By clicking underneath, I can see the stories that are associated with all those epics. And Furthermore, another advantage that you have here is that you can combine these filters. They're not exclusive. So if you want to see epics, and along the ways, you want to only see epics or talk about epics that are on flight, meaning they're not done, because they're things that are done already in the past. They are done. So I can click on my to-do and in progress epics and notice that one of the epics disappeared, meaning one of the epics is done. And so now I can, again, focus a conversation. So the theme here that I'm trying to illustrate is that filters allows you to massage the information that you're presenting to your audience altogether. So I'm just going to go ahead and clear my filters so everything will come back. Now I'm going to switch to the right. This time, for sure, I'm going to switch to the right side here, where you see this blank slate, which doesn't say much, right? This is the timeline section where you can see the span of epics over the time horizon. In this case, the blue dots represent milestones into the future, my releases. And these are, again, these are driven by fixed versions in Jira. My yellow line represents today, and it moves forward automatically day to day, right? To see some information that is meaningful here, I'm going to enable what is described as a roll-up functionality. Now, Jira Advanced Roadmap supports Kanban teams. It supports waterfall teams if you are still using waterfall, and you're, for some reason you are using Jira. And it also supports Scrum frameworks. And the reason why I'm clarifying that is because in this, for this particular example, I'm using a team that is using Scrum, and they are using sprints. So when you are mapping stories into a sprint in Jira, when you create a sprint, Jira defines or asks you to define the start date and the end date of that sprint, right? So when I bring the rollup functionality, the tool is smart enough to grab that information from Jira. And as you can see when I click on the checkboxes, magically, these bar charts show up in my screen. And what it's telling me is that the stories that are underneath are mapped to sprints. And so it's using that information to drive the mapping of those bars, those progress bars, right? In my case, I'm selecting the progress bar to display the status of the epics underneath. So green will be that epic is done. Blue, that epic has work underneath that is in the to-do state. And dark gray represents that is in the to-do, right? So some work is not quite being actioned against. And the ones that have nothing, that means that there may be stories underneath, but those stories aren't part of no sprint into the future, right? They haven't been considered for any sprint planning sessions. So that gives you a sense of, oh wow, I still have some work here that's still unplanned altogether. And so I can focus my attention in talking to the teams about planning in those areas. Let's see, I am going to now real quick then focus on the middle region here, which is the Microsoft Excel-like functionality, which is expanded when you click on the headers on Jira Advanced Roadmap. The headers will expand or contract fields that you see on the screen, right? These fields actually are driven from Jira. They could be custom fields. It could be just the inbox fields. Most of the fields are supported by JAR, with the exception of multi-line fields, like, for example, the description field, which is a multi-line field. It's not supported on JAR. There may be a change about that, but as of now, it's not. But you can have even custom fields added to it. This is a custom field, and it's a single text field. So somebody can actually write a description here and save it, and it will be saved with Jira when I send those changes back to Jira. Really useful fields here. Oh, and by the way, these fields are highly configurable. So if by any reason, when you start in Jira, you're going to see only one field, and multiple fields, depending who created the plan. You say, I don't want to see the status field anymore. You can remove the status field, and suddenly your view will not contain that field. Or if you want to add the status field because it's missing, I can just simply add it. It's added to the end of the queue. And by dragging and dropping the tiles here, I organize whereabouts. By putting it at the very top, I'm telling the tool, I want to see that as my first field as my first column in my view. Notice that some of the fields have this gray arrow, and that gray arrow represents that field is sortable. So I can sort by simply just clicking on the gray arrow. Now, doesn't look like much, but when you're doing product managers, which are using Jira, within Jira, there's no sorting functionality. So they end up putting the data, exporting the data in Excel, doing some cleanup, then doing some ranking so that they can work, for example, on using the priority field, because they're leveraging the priority fields and they want to work in the highest priority tickets that they have. So they can do the refinement sessions from there. Well, guess what? If they're using Jira Advanced Roadmap, now you don't have to export to Excel. You can just do the ranking from here by simply limiting the view to just show me the stories, and then I want to be able to rank by the highest tickets. And now I can start my grooming session, right? My refinement session, rather. The fields are also, you can change the information within the fields. You can assign tickets from here, just like you would do in Jira, but here you have Jira Advanced Roadmap. You could also change data such as a story point. So after talking to Raf, which is the only developer in this company, meaning me, we realized, hey, this is not going to work out for us. Rather than breaking the story down, we realized actually it's a lot less work than we anticipated, and really it's going to turn down to be 5 story points. Great, I can do the changes here, and then send those changes to your Advanced Roadmap subsequently. So there's a lot of the theme here is that you get a lot of editing and sorting functionality between these columns, and you can change, remove columns, and add other columns that are significant to you. A very good column that I actually have leveraged across different organizations is this progress by issue count. And what that allows me to do is when I'm meeting with people outside of the Agile team, VPs of engineering or product managers, which are really driven by results. They want to see where are we at. Well, guess what? This column here summarizes for me precisely where are we at. So, for example, as I'm looking through my features, this is telling me, hey, you happen to have, you are 18% done in this feature. As a team, we have 81% of the work that is associated with this epic still on flight. And so again, you keep going down and going over the rinse and repeat process, bringing that information about. So from that perspective, you don't have to rely on Excel and do some magic in Excel in order to calculate the percentile of completion. The tool also already does that for you. I am going to also switch slightly within the context of the columns here to these key fields here, which is the incoming dependencies and outgoing dependencies. This is rather powerful for many reasons, right? In Jira, you can see the dependencies. That's not a problem. But to see them in Jira, you have to open the ticket, then go down in a fishing expedition, down this dependency section. And if you have many dependencies, then you have to start opening the dependencies perhaps in separate tabs so you can understand information such as what type of dependency it is, who owns it, and so on. What is the status? In Jar, I can see my incoming dependencies, meaning somebody is dependent on my team. And when I see a number like in this number 5, I can click on the down arrow and I can see a list of the dependencies. And what is significant here is that not all dependencies are critical. Some of them are benign, like for example, is related to, okay? but when it's blocked by or dependent by, those are critical dependencies. So I can see what is the type of the dependency. I can see what is the ticket that is dependent on, and notice that I have different project keys here, meaning I'm aggregating dependencies from 2 teams. I can see the status and who owns those dependencies. And this becomes very valuable when you're doing sprint planning session. Let's say you don't want to refactor the code later on. Ideally, you want these dependencies, which are blocked by or dependent by, to be done. So you want to reach out to Ralph and say, hey, I would like to include this dependency in my next sprint. What's your plan of action? Right? So you can start having those conversations and of timing. Similarly, you have outgoing dependencies, and that is some other team have a dependency, or some other member within my team has a dependency on this particular story and me, right? So, and that outgoing dependency can be mapped, both incoming or outgoing dependencies, to any issue types, right? So you're not restricted from a story has to only be dependent on a story. No, you can have a story that can block an epic, or an epic that can block an initiative, or a bug that can block an initiative. So as long as you can map it in Jira, you can map it here as well. You can add the dependencies here and send them back to Jira if you wish to just do a lot of the work within this tool, as opposed to switching back and forth between Jira and Jira Advanced Roadmap. In the context of dependencies, I'm going to spend just a few more seconds to showcase that in the timeline view here, you notice that there's some these badges, these circles, to the left and to the right. It's the same information that you see here. I'm going to collapse the field. If I click on the number 5, again, it provides me the same pop-up and with the same information. So there are different ways that you can access the dependency information within Jira Advanced Roadmap. And for some of you, including myself, that are fan of the spaghetti view, which means people who like to see the dependencies in lines, I have the ability to switch my view of dependencies so that I can visualize. It becomes kind of convoluted, but now I can see the connection between outgoing and ingoing dependencies across different issue types, and that's across the board, or across all the issue types, and across all the teams that are participating in this plan. Lastly, in the topic of dependencies, there's a dependency report, which is a favorite report of many teams, and they favor this type of view where they can see the issues be mapped, and they can discuss them with different team members, or print it out and share it that way. So the theme here that I'm trying to illustrate is that the dependencies, which are a thorn to a lot of teams, the tool does a reasonably good job at aggregating the dependencies, as long as those teams are part of the plan. And they can be more than one team, more than one project. Notice that I've been doing a lot of changes without fear of, oh my God, these changes are going to go back and pollute my original Jira view. And that's not necessarily the case. Jira Advanced Roadmap does not auto-sync changes into Jira. Basically, you can do all the changes. Think of Jira Advanced Roadmap as having a separate database than Jira. Those changes have been kept track under this option here that is called Review Changes at the very top right. And the moment that is highlighted in blue, it tells me the count of changes that I have done. Clicking on that option shows me all the changes, and I can choose to select all or deselect and cherry pick few changes that I want to send and save in Jira so that it's in sync with what I see in Jira Advanced Roadmap. Similarly, I can choose one or all changes and say, you know what, I was together with the team working to 11 o'clock at night, and we were drinking whiskey and we we're having a good time. And today, when we came in the morning, we realized none of the what if scenarios that we were changing in the plan are valid. And I can simply just tell the tool, discard the changes, meaning don't save anything in Jira. And by the way, bring me back the original view that I have in Jira Advanced Roadmap at the beginning of my session with the team. So by doing so, now I'm back to the original view. Now, next, I think I have 2 areas more that I want to cover, and then we can open up to a Q&A session. Let me make sure I'm looking at my list here just to make sure that I'm not missing anything. And so far, so good. We're on track. In the context of risks, dependencies actually are a good point to bring about an access risk. But beyond that, notice that in my view, there are some fields here or some rows that are highlighted in yellow. And it's maybe not easy to see in your site, but there's a triangle here with a bang box or with a bang exclamation point in the center. Jira does attempt to do a reasonably good job of warning the users about potential issues with this plan view. So if I am talking again in the context of my release in November, I'm down to my few epics. And so when I see issues, I hover over that icon, and not only it tells me what the issue is about, but also it attempts to do a reasonable job as to what is a resolution to resolve that issue, right? In this case, I am using the due date field, and my due date field is way in the past, right? Some organizations use the due date field for product manager to articulate, for product management to say, this is a desired date when we'd like to see the feature so that we can play around with it, right, before we release it to the market. My release is closer to into the future, right, in November 30th. And so if I change the due date into the future, as the resolution is suggesting, that issue now is resolved. So I'm de-risking some, and it could be a number of issues that will pop up. You could also see the warnings listed here by clicking on the warnings button. And some of the issues are grayed out warnings. That means I don't have an issue that matches those scenarios. But should you have an issue that matches one of those scenarios, it will be highlighted or it will be emboldened, and it will give you a link to the issues that are related to that warning. You do have also the ability to filter the view to show you only the issues, the issue types that have issues, so that then you can have a cleanup conversation very succinctly without having to do additional filtering. Just by checking that filter or toggling that filter, it will just shrink down conversation so you can have meaningful information and meaningful conversations right away, right? That's also very useful. And in the context of risking, something that I have seen in real life in the field is that when you are in Jira, a lot of the teams are doing planning, right? They're in the backlog session and they're doing sprint planning. And so from here, they start adding stories into sprint based on conversations that they're having with engineering, product management, the Scrum Master is in the middle of it. And that's all good, right? You map it to a sprint into the future. But what happens is that when you're in Jira, you lose perspective of the release milestone. You're working sprint to sprint, right? The information becomes kind of myopic. When you're in Jira Advanced Roadmap, you are actually visualizing the milestone, which is here of the release. And so if you use the tool to do release planning, let's say you decided, I need to add this in talking to engineering. Let's just add this story to sprint 17, right? Because Raf is busy with other work. And so look what happens here. It allows me to add it to sprint 17, but it took my fixed version and it turned it red And what it's trying to warn me in this exercise or in this sample right now, I only have a few epics, but you can imagine if you have 40, 50, 60 epics for this associated with this release, you may have multiple epics that actually are exceeding the milestone timeline. And so with Jira Advanced Roadmap, you can actually hone down and root cause which epics are the ones who actually are exceeding and violating the milestone, therefore turning it red. So that's a risk. And furthermore, you can root cause it to the point of actually finding the particular issue or issues that are in sprints in this scenario, in this example, that are exceeding the milestone. And so by going up and down, you can actually see that I only have one issue that's crossing over. And I can either remove it from that sprint or reassign it to an earlier sprint that falls within the milestone timeline. And notice how right away I have the risk my release by having conversations with my team. Obviously, I mean, I wouldn't want to remove this and put it in sprint 12 without first having a meeting with my engineering team and my product management team, right? But very well the solution will be, you know what, this is a story that we don't need for this particular release. Let's just move it to a different release altogether, in which case I can actually assign it to my release that is occurring next year, right? So you have the theme here, what I'm trying to convey is that you have the ability to change fields within your advanced roadmap and identify risk and use the tool actually to de-risk as well. Likewise, I will also present one more thing, and I think I'm at a point where I can just pause for questions. Let's see. More often than not, when we work in organizations that are using Jira, those organizations are leveraging Confluence to communicate outside of the team information about the project, right? And so here I am in my Confluence page. This is a sample page that I created. Confluence allows me to put more verbose information about my project. And so I put a status, shows that I'm in progress. I put a summary, and I put just a very wordy summary that provides some of the risks as well. And together with it, I can actually embed my Jira. Let me refresh my screen here. This may be a hiccup from, there you go. You've seen some of the macros are available in, it's gonna make me look bad. This is the first time this happened, but I think it's part of the hiccup that I got kicked out earlier out of my account. And so if this was working, you'll see here embedded in Confluence the information about my Jira Advanced Roadmap in read mode only. So anybody outside of the organization, outside of the team, can actually see the plan and change filters if they want to change filters, but they will not be able to preserve those changes back into your original plan. There you go. Now it's going to make me look good. My apologies. And so this is very useful when you're talking to people outside of your project, but you're reporting, let's say on a weekly basis or once a month or twice a month. Now I can rely on Confluence to provide a read-only version of the view with ability of applying filters. So let's say we're talking in the context of the November release. Great. Now I can see only the information for the November release, but let's say within the meeting, my VP of engineering is saying, well, is it possible for me to see the data about the next release? Well, yeah, sure. I don't have to create yet another view. I can just reuse this view. And once you create this view with the fields that are meaningful to you, a big advantage that exists is that for every subsequent release management report that you're going to be doing, or any project reporting that you're going to be doing, you don't have to create this view multiple times. Because what happens is that every time you refresh this page, the tool will pick up all the data, like for example, the percentile complete. It will just bring about the latest data, the latest status on all the stories and everything else that is related. So while it's a read-only view, it's a live view. So you don't have to, for the next meeting next month, you just simply rinse and repeat. Open the page, view your project, and voila. We just keep presenting the data over and over and over again. And that's very useful when you're talking to people at the VP, the senior director levels, that they don't care to go into Jira and learn it. You just want to share the information without having to use PowerPoints or Excel or any other tools that you may use to create charts. That said, I believe the only thing that I would suggest to share is that from the tool itself, you also have the capabilities of doing bulk actions. And these are pre-generated bulk actions that you can take advantage of. Like if I want to change, not at the epic level, because epics are not assigned to sprints, but at the story level, if I want to assign all these sprints to a different sprint from what they're on, I can use the bulk action here. And if one of the bulk actions that I need to use is not listed here, you can invoke the Jira bulk action capability from within Jira Advanced Roadmap. And so it facilitates, unless you like to do your exercise, with your finger and click on each item one at a time, bulk will allow you to essentially do that. Take a cluster of tickets and make a change with a few clicks, and it will apply to all those tickets. All right. I flew through a lot of information. I trust that you will have questions. So I think at this point, I'm going to pause the presentation and welcome any of the questions that you may have.
Thanks, Ralph, for a very insightful presentation. I have used personally Advanced Roadmap, and I saw that you provided all the pointers that people can go and start exploring right away. So thank you again for all the pointers and tips. With that being said, we are opening the floor for Q&A. I already see 3 questions in our chat window. We'll take those first. First question is from Vishal. He's asking to expand a little bit on Jira structures.
Okay. Yeah. So Jira Structure is a plugin, third-party company called ALM, a very powerful plugin. But with that power also comes a cost of price, and also comes a learning curve. And that's really not the scope of our conversation today, but suffice to say that I have used it very effectively in the past, especially when this Jira Advanced Roadmap was a paid plugin as well. And we really orientated towards structures. But soon enough, when they integrated, Atlassian integrated Jira Advanced Roadmap at no additional cost, at least for that particular organization, they didn't see the value of paying extra for an additional plugin. They were able to leverage a lot of the information they needed from Jar. So, but there's a plethora of plugins out there that do similar things. All of them, like any other tool, they have good things and bad things. And if you're willing to learn, go through a steep learning curve, some of those tools will be magnificent.
Another question is from Stephen. His question is Jar available only on on-prem servers, or it's only available on cloud?
In both. So if you have an on-prem version of Jira Enterprise, you should be able to see Jira plans. In the event that you don't see it, you may need to reach out to your admin, because in a lot of the enterprises that I've worked with, the update clip for the on-prem version is not as frequent as they do on the cloud. Like I'm on the cloud, and they're updating this thing like every time I come in, I see a new set of features. But when you're on-prem, the updates are regulated by the administrators in the company, right? The system administrators or the Jira administrators. So, but I have worked with environments where they have either, and I see Jira plans, and it works just as well.
There's a follow-up question from Andy. Do you know if there are any differences between Cloud Jar and DC Jar?
Between Cloud Jar and Data center?
Yes, data center jar, DC jar.
Unless the person asking the question can come in the microphone. I mean, if by cloud jar you mean enterprise and data center, I don't think, I think those two SKUs nowadays, they blend them together. I could be wrong.
Sure.
But
Yeah, this is Andy.
Hey, Andy.
Often there is a difference between what they're doing with cloud. Like I think you mentioned roadmaps, and I think that that's a cloud only offering that they haven't provided to data center. Can you pull down plans? And I think I saw a difference here. Shared teams, have you used that?
Shared teams.
Yeah.
In what
Pull
context?
down the plans menu. Yeah. Okay, yeah, I don't see shared teams.
Right. Now there is something that I'm not addressing in this presentation because I don't have it set up. You can create Jira Advanced Roadmap have capacity planning and sprint capacity management capabilities. To enable those, you have to leverage the teams field that Jira Advanced Roadmap exposes, which is also available in Jira. Just in Jira is one of those fields that is there. It's just not visible to the users, but it can be made visible. And what that allows you to do is create cluster your organizations, your pods, if you will, into a specific teams. And Jira Advanced Roadmap does its best actually to bring the team and to do capacity management. It's not very strong, but it does have that capability.
Thank you, Ralph. Another question from Brian. For dependencies, how does JAR calculate lead time?
Oh, that's a good question. That's yeah. Are you referring? I have to play around with that myself. Are you referring to? Could the person that asked the question get in the mic? Be open to. Are you referring to these lead times?
Brian Hickman.
Brian?
Are you
Don't be
still
shy.
there? Is Brian still there? The question is, for dependencies, how does JAR calculate lead time?
Yeah. And hopefully Brian will see this recording. Brian, if you see this recording, reach out to me to my LinkedIn, and we can deep dive a little bit into that, because it's been a while since I looked into that functionality, the lead times, that is.
Sounds good. I appreciate it. I'll reach out.
Oh, hey there, Brian, you're there. Okay, good. Good that you're here. Yeah, I will post my LinkedIn in the chat window as well, so that you can reach out to me as well.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Martin has a question. What is your advice for doing capacity planning in JAR?
What is the, again?
What is your advice for doing capacity planning in JAR?
So as I mentioned, thank you for repeating. Apologies because it's coming garbled in my, it's in my end. So leverage the team's capabilities. So you can assign and create teams in Jira Advanced Roadmap. And when you create the teams and you cluster the teams together, the tool does a reasonable job at doing capacity planning. I don't have it set up. I wish I did. I can show you the example, but and that capacity planning also extends to when you're looking at this timeline view, and it breaks this timeline view with the sprints as they relate to time. And it will show you, like when you're exceeding the capacity or the velocity of the team, it'll give you red dots or green dots showing you the health of that sprint based on the capacity and velocity of the teams. Really cool stuff. So I apologize for not having that ready for me to demo it. However, in the absence of that, I will give you a humble advice. I call it primitive capacity planning. Some people get enough information out of it. In my context here, once I apply my filters, let's say I want to see the stories that are in the active sprint, and I want to do some level of capacity planning. Now, in this environment, there's only one developer, and that's me. So, but on the debut settings, I have this option to do group buys. And when I group by as I need, taking the information from the filters, basically I'm telling the tool, show me only for the November release on the active sprint, right? And so what it's breaking down for me is, number one, is telling me which epics are getting impacted by the stories underneath on the active sprint, which is a question a lot of managers ask, hey, what features are you working on the sprint? Great. By applying those two filters, you're gonna see the features that are being worked. But I can also see the stories that, in this case, Raf are assigned to him. And if you have 5 or 7 engineers, you'll be able to see this breakdown. And if I want to eliminate the epic and just look at the stories, I can do so like so. And you'll see the other engineers listed underneath. And so by looking at the numbers of stories assigned to an engineer, you can actually do some level of capacity planning. That said, I will warn that because an engineer has less stories doesn't mean that they have less work. One of those stories could be a long pole that they just haven't broken down yet. And so, but it does provide you visibility as to the load balancing, and then you can have conversations with the team. Hey, what about this story? Is it really only 2? Can you help, Karen or Raf or Joe to take additional stories or take some of their stories? Because ideally, as a team, when you're doing Scrum, the ideal is to actually burn down chart down to 0 and collaborate across the team so that they can burn it down to 0, right? Rather than bringing new work. At least that's the culture that I try to foster. So hopefully that answers the question in a long-winded way.
There's another question. We have a structure today. Is there a compare contrast between jar and structure?
I don't have a gap analysis on structures. I mean, if there should be some information out there on the web that provides you some gap analysis. The only thing I can suggest about structures is if your company is willing to pay for it versus getting a free tool. No, it's not free, but it's already part of JAR. I would suggest to all those teams who are in the past are considering getting a new plugin. Recently, I did that with a client here in San Francisco. Take a look at Jira Advanced Roadmap. I mean, I don't make any money from it. I'm a consultant, just like many consultants out there. But before you go out and spend money and bring a new plugin into your ecosystem, see if your Advanced Roadmap answers the questions that you are looking for. And if it does, then you don't need an additional plugin. If it doesn't, and there's something else that structures or big picture or one of the many tools, Dragon Boat, any of the tools that are out there, then that's an exercise that you have to do some internal gap analysis and understand. That's one suggestion that I have. The other thing that you also need to consider is that in every environment that we introduce some of the plugins, and I'm not just talking about structures in general, but just plugins in general, when compared to JAR, the learning curve is a little bit more steeper. And because JAR is part of the Atlassian ecosystem, I personally have noticed that there haven't been any degradation on the Jira instance performance, whereby some of the plugins from different companies, I have worked with organizations that they have to disable the plugin because it brought Jira to a very slow down performance level. That was unacceptable. So those are things that you need to consider when you're considering plugins, right? Cost, learning curve, and would that have an impact in my ecosystem? All right.
All right. Great presentation, Ralph. Thank you so much for joining us today and enlightening us with all your wisdom from the questions and the amazing engagement that we've had. We had almost 33 people. It definitely looks like it is a topic that people were very interested in and hopefully are going to take it and implement it in their organizations. So I'm very thankful that this was such an interesting and useful topic. So
Excellent.
I want to do a quick shameless plug for our next event. Our next event is going to be on January 18th. Yes, we are taking November and December off. We don't get a lot of people attending in November and December, so we've decided to take a break as well. This organization or this meetup is run by volunteers. So we are taking a little break. We'll be back in January, but we're back with a bang. We have an amazing topic, which is exploring the future of agile coaching. Is it evolution or is it extinction? So as you have seen that, across our industry, across the globe, there are some dark passing clouds on agile coaches. And we want to see, is this an opportunity for us to reinvent ourselves and become better, or become extinct? So those are the two choices. And we have an amazing panel featuring Lisa Atkins, who is the global guru on agile coaching. We have Dhawal Panchal, who is from Texas, and I think he's standing for elections for Scrum Alliance for the director. And then we have from Washington, D.C., Jesse Favell, who has an amazing book on agile coaching and agile practices. So 3 amazing panelists, and that's going to happen in January, and we will be posting all material in December. So we look forward to seeing you back here. Once again, thank you everyone for joining. Thank you, Ralph, and we'll talk to you soon.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody, for being here. And thank you, the staff. Cheers.
Thank you.